My name is Keith, aka LoLByTheNumbers, and welcome to another 2014 League of Legends World Championship video analysis. Once again, this is a video analysis, not a shoutcast. There will be plenty of spoilers throughout the match, just a warning if you haven't seen it. I will be focusing primarily on macro level strategy, specifically looking at team compositions, their win conditions, how teams do, don't, and how they should be using their compositions to pull off the win. I'll also be looking at map rotations, objective control, the occasional individual matchup, item choices, and individual play when these things become paramount to the win or loss of a team. For this match, we have Najin Shield against Alliance. This is their first match in the group stages, and so without further ado, let's get into picks and bans. So for picks and bans, we see Fizz, Maokai, Ryze being banned out on Najin Shield's side. This is pretty solid focus onto Wicked, focusing out Froggen's, Fizz as well. All fairly target banned, with Maokai and Ryze being the trifecta of top lane. Najin Shield also do have a plan for this top lane, who they're going to pick, and we'll see it come into play as their last choice. On Alliance's side, we see Nidalee, Zed, and Alistar being banned out. They have left open Lee Sin and Zilean, and this is essentially what they're trading for in this first pick. Najin Shield end up taking Lee Sin as their first pick, with Alliance grabbing Zilean and Kha'Zix, securing that highly sought after Time Mage, as well as just grabbing the secondary jungler for all of Worlds. This Zilean is going to end up being support. I really don't like him all that much as a support for several reasons. One of them being you don't get full use out of his ultimate without him having cooldown reduction or having AP. One thing that Alliance will do is they're going to run all sort of low HP non-tank targets. So this lessens that effect on Zilean's ult, as they don't have as high of an HP pool to return to them. We also do get to see Najin Shield pulling out their Zilean counter. Unfortunately for them, Zilean ends up in the support role, so we don't see how as well as it works, but we'll see it in another game of Najin Shield. For their second round of rotations, Najin Shield pick up Thresh and Tristana. This is a decent lane combination. There's nothing real special about it. I don't feel that Thresh offers all that much protection to Tristana. She already has a very large leap. He also doesn't provide very good offensive abilities in conjunction with Tristana, simply because Tristana gets bullied out in lane. He does offer large playmaking potential for his team, though, as well as a very nice, solid CC. So he's just a really good pick overall from the support role. Just kind of awkward with Tristana. This is partially why we'll see Najin Shield run the 2v1 lanes in this match, heading top to avoid the Lucian Zilean matchup that's going to be stronger than them in the duo lane. So in Alliance's next rotation, they pick up Aurelia, very solid top laner, plays well against pretty much anything. And so when you don't know who's coming being your top laner and you have Maokai, Ryze already locked out, Aurelia is a great pickup, especially considering Rumble doesn't do so well against her. So you don't want to pick Rumble then end up fighting in Aurelia. We also see Lucian being picked up, and this will solidify Alliance's bot lane, though Najin Shield don't know it yet. Lucian and Zilean are actually stronger in this matchup than Tristana Thresh for a couple of reasons, and I'll get into that later. And so it does kind of shore up a bunch of the weakness that Zilean has in lane, not being able to offer much to his lane support, or his lane ADC rather. On Najin Shield side, we see them picking up Lulu and Riven. The Riven is Najin Shield's counter to Aurelia up top. It's probably who they were planning for playing up top from the start. Potentially also, if Alliance had picked up Rumble, they might have taken Riven. I don't really like Riven as a pickup here. She does do well against Aurelia in the start, but since Najin and White Shield are already planning on the 2v1, or maybe not yet planning, but are going to do the 2v1, she loses out on that lane dominance from levels like 1 and 2. She also doesn't necessarily fit into Najin and White Shield's composition very well. They've got a very strong protect the ADC composition going, this death ball composition that wants to stick together. And while Riven can provide some peel with her stun, as well as high damage to anyone on Alliance team who tries to jump into Najin White Shield's team, she doesn't offer much else in terms of protection. She doesn't offer a shield, she doesn't have anything long range to offer, no tricky movements. Whereas Thresh, Lulu, Lee Sin, they're all providing something solid. Lee Sin has very good peel with his kick, offers a shield, slow and attack speed slow. I think that at this point in the patch, the attack speed slow has been removed. It's just the movement speed slow. But it does provide the movement speed slow. Thresh has CC and 2 slows, Lantern for movement. There's all kinds of protection, whereas Riven just is essentially going to stand in the group and wait to see if Alliance go in, and then she can be useful. But otherwise, she's just kind of like a standing body. She does, however, offer Najin White Shield a little bit of engagement. She can use her dashes in conjunction with a flash to try to get into Alliance's team and then have it followed up by Lulu ult, and that could be successful. But with the double stuns on Alliance's team, it's going to be pretty hard for her to get in, as well as against the slow of Zilean and Kha'Zix. On Alliance's side, we see the last pickup of Twisted Fate. It's a pretty solid pickup, gives some wave clear, gives some good split push potential, great gank ability, especially in conjunction with Aurelia. It's just a pretty solid pickup and has lots of playmaking potential. Before we get into team compositions, I'm going to talk a little bit about the level 1. Najin and White Shield are going to go for the 2v1 up top. They have this planned out, but they do not pull off the freeze on the top lane. Alliance don't pull off the freeze on the bottom lane either. This is something that, since neither one pull off the freeze, doesn't hamper the one team over the other. But if one team had been able to pull off the freeze, it really would have solidified them a huge advantage early on. One thing to notice that Najin and White Shield do when they go top with their 2v1 is they hide in the bush, trying to make sure that they're getting this 1v2 lane rather than meeting up with Lucian and Zilean. And this is why they don't get the freeze. Also, by not showing themselves, it makes Lucian and Zilean on the bottom lane have to worry a little bit about where they are, and they're not sure if they should pull off the freeze either. So there's a small bit of mind games going on. But still, one or both of these teams should have been pulling off the freeze. So let's get into team compositions. I'll talk about Alliance's team first. Alliance's team is very heavy mid-game focused. Lucian and Zilean really hit their spikes early on. In this situation, if they can find the 2v2, they'll be able to bully, simply because Zilean has the guaranteed damage onto Tristana with his time bombs, and Lucian is a huge bully against Tristana as well. Lucian can simply walk up to Tristana, get his Q, get the double shot, have a Zilean bomb as well. It's maybe an auto attack from him, and then you've all of a sudden created a lot of damage really quickly onto Tristana from level 1, and they can continue to do this throughout the match. The one worry is going to come from Thresh's hooks, but that's not really an issue for Lucian. As long as he simply walks up to Tristana to get his Q and his passive procs, if Thresh throws out his hook, Lucian simply dashes away, gets another 2 passive shots onto Tristana. The trade value and safety of Lucian is so much higher than Tristana, as well as if Thresh tries to go onto Zilean, Lucian charges at Tristana, out trades in damage once again. So this is why Zillion does end up working in this matchup. Unfortunately, we don't see Alliance do this bully potential later on, and I think it's one of the point that cost them the match. Getting into Alliance's team in terms of the mid-game power, we know Aurelia really spikes at level 6, even again at level 7 and 9, as well as when she hits her Trinity Force. These are all points in which she's very strong, very solid setups for ganks. Everything about her kit is just really good at this early point in time. Same thing for Twisted Fate. Once he hits his ultimate, he gets great playmaking ability. He has strong mid-game potential with maxing his wild cards and then pick a card, with his third skill only coming in a minor later on. So with this playmaking potential of Alliance, with their strong mid-game power, they essentially need to win lane, transition into dragon control, and then move into 1-3-1 or 1-4 split pushes. If Twisted Fate can get Aurelia ahead, that's going to be really strong. Aurelia will be able to perform that split push against Riven in the top lane and draw Najin White Shield apart, as Najin White Shield's team is very teamfight focused. The more Alliance can pull them apart, the better. This also is true for Twisted Fate. At some point during this match, Twisted Fate can potentially go for the split push, going down to the bottom lane while Lucian, Zillion, and Kha'Zix protect the mid lane. He'll be perfectly fine down there. He can push. He has the double defensive summoners for retreating if he needs it, as well as his ultimate. Just a couple wards to keep an eye on to Thresh should make him survivable down there, while Lucian, Kha'Zix, and Zillion bully out the mid lane. If they end up fighting Tristana, once again, Lucian's the stronger bully. Kha'Zix and Lucian could jump in there to get solid damage onto her and push her away. Najin White Shield's wave clear is also sitting on Lulu, so if Twisted Fate is able to draw Lulu away, this gives Alliance a good opportunity to push mid turrets with their bully laners, their bully duo lane. Once Alliance gets some sort of lead, they transition into that 1-3-1 that I was talking about, with Aurelia and Twisted Fate on the sides, or you could do Twisted Fate in the middle, able to gank for top and bottom lanes. However, against Lulu it's really hard. Lulu is very good at fast pushing. She's going to keep the mid lane up against Twisted Fate's tower. If she's ever in the mid lane, it's going to be very hard for Alliance to get into a turret because of her wave clear, as well as Twisted Fate being unable to truly 1v1 her, Twisted Fate not being a duelist. So Alliance are going to have to find some sort of opportunity to draw Lulu out of the mid lane or kill her so that they can take the mid lane tier 1 turret. So as soon as Alliance reach that mid game power spike, particularly with first item on Aurelia, first item on Lucian, they should transition to dragon control. They have much greater strength than Najin White Shield. They have the double stuns that is going to really catch Najin White Shield off guard. Completely prevents Lee Sin and Riven from being able to engage onto Alliance's team. And then you have the poke with Twisted Fate wildcards as well. So Alliance have the options in the mid game to take complete control of Dragon and wait for Najin White Shield to make a mistake. After gaining Dragon control and objective control, Alliance can look to catch out Lee Sin at his buffs. We'll see Kha'Zix evolve his wings first. Not normally a fan of that, but it works really well in this match. So with his first evolved wings, he can easily leap over walls around Dragon, walls in the jungle, and him and Twisted Fate can make some solid ganks onto Lee Sin. Try and catch him out in the jungle real quick and leave. Other than that, keep up the 1-3-1 and slowly push into Najin White Shield's base. Keep up lots of wards, wait for them to make a rotational mistake. When Najin White Shield make a rotational mistake through the jungle, Alliance can quickly capitalize on it with Twisted Fate ult and Aurelia teleport. So they're going to have to really use their map mobility, their strengths in the 1v1 to create opportunities in this game. So that is Alliance's team composition and their strategy and their win conditions. As for Najin White Shield, as mentioned before, they're running pretty much a death ball composition. They really need Tristana to get going. Tristana's going to be the one to put the nail in the coffin for Alliance's team. If she gets going, Alliance can't stop her. Alliance are lacking any type of engagement. They're lacking any real type of assassination. And they don't have AoE to deal with Najin White Shield when they simply group up as a 5-man ball. This is very much the core strength of any death ball composition for Protect the ADC. If the other team lacks good poke, good AoE, or good assassination engagement potential, you're going to be extremely strong and almost unkillable. We'll see if Tristana is able to get to 3 items in this game at an early enough period in time. Najin White Shield essentially win. At that point, Alliance are going to have to try and pull Najin White Shield out of these 5v5 fights by running the 1-3-1 split push. Anyone who's ever fought Tristana Lulu knows that Lulu provides a huge amount of damage to Tristana through just picks as well as solid protection. It's a very dangerous combination, and this is what Najin White Shield is going to be looking for. So their win condition is don't lose lanes, try and go as even as possible, never fall too far behind Alliance, don't give kills over to Alliance, scale up through the mid game, maybe pester at Dragon or look for a steal, and just wait out until Tristana can scale up. If you reach it to about the 25-30 minute mark without being over, say, 5 or 6k gold behind, Najin White Shield will then be able to start creating the pressure themselves in the map. If they reach the 30-35 minute mark at even gold or even potentially above, that's Najin White Shield taking the game. It all of a sudden switches over from Alliance's control into Najin White Shield's game to lose, as they've already won it if they play right. And here we do see a neat play. If you watch Zilean and Tristana coming up from the bottom, Tristana could have blocked Zilean from this whole situation, but does not. She thinks her team has it. Najin White Shield aren't respecting the strength of the stun of Froggen, and we see Twisted Fate getting in. We see Kha'Zix having evolved his wings coming into play because of how deep he gets. And when Zilean is there, Zillian's ultimate allows Kha'Zix to play so aggressively. So this is good play by Zilean to have moved up the lane. It's a bit of a misplay by Najin White Shield. As Tristana knew where Lucian was, she could have simply blocked Zilean from getting into this mid lane. Najin White Shield also could have been less aggressive at that turret. One big thing to always know about whenever you're at a turret, it's usually better to let your ranged champions safely attack it instead of going melee and attacking it. When we see this coming into play with Lee Sin getting caught by a Twisted Fate flash, and then Kha'Zix getting the resets on his leap to get in against Thresh. So this is one of the mistakes that Najin White Shield shouldn't be doing. They don't need to be aggressive in this match. They need to scale up, so anything they can do to sort of prolong the match is fine. They didn't need to rush that turret. By rushing that turret, they made it an unsafe play, and now Alliance end up with a lead, which is something that Najin White Shield can't afford in this match. One thing I want to point out about the bottom lane is we see Tristana and Lucian are on even hit points. Or not even hit points, but even CS. In fact, Tristana has a tiny lead. This should not be the case, and if you go back and watch Lucian and Zilean playing in their lane, they're playing very passive. They're letting Tristana push into their tower, which is something Tristana shouldn't be able to do. As stated before, Lucian simply needs to walk up against Tristana, get his double shot passives, wait for the Thresh hook to come out, dash towards Tristana, follow it up with even more double shot passives, and just completely bully her out of lane. When they both went back to lane, Tristana had a BF sword, but Lucian had pickaxe plus longsword. This is essentially only a 580 difference, and Lucian's ability is way stronger at this point. So he should have been going after Tristana at every opportunity. Zilean can get his bombs. The speed up from Zilean would also really help Lucian get into position, as well as being able to dodge Thresh hooks, maybe even being able to save his dash for the chase. So this is a big mistake on Alliance's part. They didn't properly bully the Tristana lane with their combination, and this allowed Tristana to get into her mid to late game a little bit quicker. If she was down an extra 20 to 30 CS, this still delays Najin White's shield's ability. Even though it's only by a minute or two, it does end up being a big deal in certain games. There's no reason to not be pressuring your lane opponent if you have the much stronger lane. So right now, Najin White Shield just need to be defensive. They need to get as much CS as they can, make sure they don't lose out. Don't let Alliance get too many more kills. This is particularly directed at Riven, as Riven is in the most danger in her lane against this Twisted Fate. We do see a tricky play by Twisted Fate. As soon as he loses his tower, he doesn't care, he runs off. He doesn't bother to stay to protect. He goes top, and we see the double stuns killing Riven. On the bottom lane, we finally see Alliance going aggressive with their duo lane, and they get the kill in the 2v2 and lose almost no hit points. They even almost get the double kill, Tristana getting away with maybe 200 something HP. So this showcases the strength Lucian has against Zilean. Zilean has against Thresh, Tristana, and they should have been using this much earlier. Unfortunately, they do not, and it will come back to bite them in the behind. So Alliance now have a pretty solid lead. They've gotten 4 kills, they've gotten a turret. They're running higher CS on the top lane by a good solid 30. And they're running a almost 3,000 gold lead. This dragon should be this next focus, as it's unlikely that Riven is going to be able to provide nearly as much support as Irelia will be able to. And we see Najin White Shield sort of going in against Alliance and trying to flank, but Najin White Shield's team is not good at the flank. Alliance's team is much stronger in these small fights. You see them all run top side, and they catch Lulu out in the double stuns and kill her. Najin White Shield coming up from the bottom, once again get caught by Alliance Lee Sin. Najin White Shield give 2 kills and Dragon over to Alliance when they really shouldn't have been fighting for this. Riven should have stayed top, looked for that turret, and if Najin White Shield wanted to try and contest, it's not from the flanking position. Tristana and Thresh needed to be with Lulu and Lee Sin. As we see here, the best way to defeat a pincer is to chase down onto one side, and Alliance do that properly. So another misplay by Najin White Shield. At this point, we see a 5,000 gold lead, and it's only 17 minutes into the game. It's 0-6. The one saving grace for Najin White Shield is this Lulu pushing so hard against middle lane, and it sort of, I think it catches Alliance off guard. Since they don't have their middle tier 1 turret, they start to be a little bit passive. It's at this point that Alliance should be starting to run their 1-3-1 split push, and starting to run it very heavily. Irelia should be pushing down the top lane as fast as possible at all times, moving into the tier 2 turret of Najin White Shield. She probably should wait for her Trinity Force, as I believe she's really close. And we see a great teleport as well coming down from Wicked. And Najin White Shield make an over-aggressive play again. One thing to note is how well Froggen has been using his ultimates when on the defensive. Right there, he uses his ultimate when Lee Sin goes in. That way he knows where the support is coming from for Najin White Shield. Going back to the point about split pushing before, right now is when Alliance should be performing this split push. Especially as soon as Aurelia gets her Trinity Force, that's should be the key point that says, let's go guys. So Alliance should run Aurelia top, send Twisted Fate down to the bottom lane, have Lucian, Zilean, and Kha'Zix work the mid lane. Get lots of wards in the blue side and the red side jungle of Najin White Shield, mostly looking at the paths going into the lane, such as the 4-way area by the blue buff, and then the bush near the entrance between the 2 turrets in the middle. This way Alliance can get vision on when Najin White Shield are making moves to reinforce their side lanes, and this would let Alliance know when to push the middle turret and when to push the sides, when to back off. And they should be transitioning into this right now. Part of this big reason is that Kha'Zix, Lucian, Zilean will be much stronger than Thresh, Tristana, Lee Sin will be. And so it's be a great opportunity for Alliance to make light of the fact that they've already lost their mid turret. With the mid tier 1 down, you need a strong force going up front, and that's what Alliance could provide if they swapped Twisted Fate down to the bottom to split push and have their trio in the mid lane. This would also really hamper Lulu's roam if she ever left middle. The middle turret goes down. I also am not sure why Aurelia is not trying to fight in this 1v1. She has a decent ward. She can probably have placed it in a better spot, but she has the power over Riven right now, and she should be using it. Especially at this point, she can see where everyone else on the other team is, except for maybe Lee Sin. Instead, Alliance play extremely passively right now, and they let Najin White Shield make the moves. There's no real reason why this Lucian should have been caught out here. He's too deep all by himself, and not by himself I don't mean alone, but he's too deep without pressure from his other lanes. Nobody was in the middle. Kha'Zix was back in base. Aurelia is not bringing pressure onto the tier 2 turret on the top side. And this means that Najin White Shield can simply send 4 people against one without losing anything. And this is one of the key points of any split push, be it 1-4 or 1-3-1, is you have to be pushing together. By pushing together, you're creating pressure on 2 or 3 points at a time, meaning that if the other team draw members to focus on a different point, that they leave one of their other points weak. So in this situation, if they sent 4 bottom, then they would have left their mid lane open. If Twisted Fate had been there, he could have pushed at the turret, potentially taken it. And so this is the key point of any split push. And we're starting to get into some dangerous territory for Alliance. Tristana's got very solid CS. She's almost to her 2nd item. And Alliance get caught by this Thresh hook 3 times in a row. Lucian on bot lane, Zillion in the river bush, and now once again Kha'Zix at dragon. And they're getting caught in ways that they're not even together when they're doing this. They had bad dragon timing. If Alliance had proper dragon timing, Aurelia would have already been there 20 seconds ahead. Zillion would not have been in that river bush for any reason. They could have taken vision control instead of letting Najin White Shield take vision control. And if we look at the dragon pit, there are 6 or 7 wards from Najin White Shield, including 3 pinks. Once again, Aurelia is seen in the middle lane instead of the top lane, and I really don't understand this from Alliance. Aurelia is the one best suited to fighting Riven. Even though Twisted Fate does have Zhonya's, it's not going to stop Riven from killing him. And you're putting somebody who's melee against Lulu who has great wave clear. Aurelia is going to gain nothing in this middle lane. She's not going to be able to kill Lulu. She's not going to be able to damage the turret. All Alliance have been doing for the past 6 or 7 minutes since the last dragon, so 6 minutes, is farming. And this is what works for Najin White Shield's team and doesn't work for Alliance's team. Alliance's team are going to get outscaled not only in champion choices, but in team composition. So this is a big mistake being made by Alliance. To even capitalize on this in terms of scaling, Lucian's build is meant for this mid-game, for this turret pushing, for this 1-3-1 split push. He goes Bloodthirster, Sheen. He's going to end up building a Trinity Force, and while this is a very strange build, it does work, and it gives a lot of mid-game power, especially against turrets. The Bloodthirster provides a nice solid shield so that Lucian can go up to the tower, take a hit or two. The Sheen or the Trinity Force provide great damage against turrets in that first shot, so it makes it very easy for Lucian to get in, do 200 or 300 damage to a turret, and then back out without taking any damage. Since there's very little engage onto Najin White Shield's team, and because Lucian is able to remove slows, he can take his 2 shots and then back out with his dash if Thresh or Riven are trying to catch him in a stun or hook. We see a nice crazy fight here, and I'm not entirely sure why Alliance are here fighting. Once again, their team composition is meant for the split push, is meant for the 1-3-1. And instead, we find Alliance have pushed the bottom lane with 5 people. There's a lack of engage on Najin White Shield's team, and we just saw it right there. Even though Thresh got a hook under turret, Alliance were simply able to run away. There was some good play involving dashes, slows, stuns from Alliance. There's just not much for Najin White Shield to catch up to Alliance, and if we watch again, we'll see it pretty handily. As Najin White Shield are trying to catch up, we see the slows coming out from Kha'Zix. Good stun onto Lulu. If it weren't for a couple flashes from Najin White Shield's team on the Lulu on the Riven, then they would have never touched Alliance's team. So my point of being this is that Alliance have decent amount of disengage with Kha'Zix slow and Zillion speed up, as well as the dashes and jumps. So they have ways to escape Najin White Shield's team, and Najin White Shield's team does not have strong engagement. They have to flash in with Riven, they have to use Lee Sin to get the insect kick. There's plenty of ways for Alliance to avoid this. They can simply run away and keep that Kha'Zix W slow, preventing Najin White Shield from being able to catch up. What this means is if Alliance hadn't got caught unfrogging down there, if they had instead had Aurelia up top, if Najin White Shield had brought in 5 to fight these 4, Alliance could have ran away, and then Alliance could have ran away as 4-man team, Aurelia could have taken top turret. Alliance could have even delayed Najin White Shield, playing on the outskirts, throwing TF wildcards, and evolved Spike Rack from Kha'Zix to delay Najin White Shield from being able to back, and maybe Aurelia, instead of just getting the tier 2 turret on top lane, gets the inhibitor turret and maybe the inhib. It all depends on how it played out, but it is a possibility, even if it would be a really a best case scenario to get all of those. So once again, we see the first move from Alliance since they've taken down the outer turrets is a 5-man push. But a 5-man push almost negates Twisted Fate's ultimate, turns it just into vision, negates Aurelia's teleport, and the fact that she's so much stronger than Riven at this point, having this frozen heart and Ninja Tabbies, as well as the damage of Trinity Force. The 1v1 potential is lying in Aurelia, but Alliance aren't using it. So talking enough about Alliance, Najin White Shield have been doing a good job. They've been, especially in this Lulu, she's completely keeping this mid lane pushed always, and it's created tons of opportunities for Najin White Shield and put Alliance on the back foot when they had no need to be on the back foot. So by keeping this tier 1 turret alive, by keeping the creep waves pushed up into Alliance's tier 2 turret, it's continually drawing Alliance away from being the aggressors. It's well played by this Lulu. Najin White Shield have also done a great job in these past 2 dragons, setting up large vision nets, enabling them to get hooks with Thresh, enabling them to take these dragons, especially when they shouldn't have been able to take the previous dragon. This one we can give that to them. They've reached the 30-minute mark, only being 3k gold behind. And this means that Najin White Shield have taken the lead in this game. Their team composition has scaled past Alliance's 5v5 fight vastly, and Tristana has reached her 3-item power spike. This is even more important because Lucian is not building for the late game, Trinity Force Bloodthirster being for that mid-game power, for the tower pushing potential. So this just expands the power gap between Tristana and Lucian. So, having done well at defending, giving a lot of props to this Lulu specifically, props to Thresh for getting the hook plays, as well as for defending Tristana well in the bottom lane. They really should have been bullied a lot harder down there earlier. Lucian and Zilean should have been able to take the tower earlier. But it's a good job by Najin White Shield to not show fear, and when they're 0-7 to not give up, to know what their team composition is good at and where they need to look for opportunities. We do see Alliance doing something pretty smart here. They know they've lost. We can assume that they know that they've lost the power to fight 5v5, and so they send 2 members down to the bottom lane, and it's a very strong members. Twisted Fate Aurelia can push all the way into Najin White Shield's base, and if they don't send somebody else back, Najin White Shield are going to lose their base. I do think Alliance might have gone a little too deep at this point, but it was debated. It was acceptable. Maybe Twisted Fate should have flashed, got that card earlier. Hindsight is 20/20. Lulu is able to get there and save Riven just barely. If I had been Alliance, me as a player, and I guess as a coach and analyst, I really prefer objective focus rather than kill focus. I think that Alliance, instead of chasing Riven down that far, would have been able to take the turret quicker, potentially taking the inhibitor, and that would shift the entire landscape of this game by having that bottom inhibitor down. It is also potential that if they had done that, Riven and Lulu come out with Lulu speed, home guard boots, and they put a lot of pressure as well. The end result would have been the same as it is now, with the inhibitor turret going down and nobody dying. So it's hard to say what really would have been how things turn out. Twisted Fate using his ultimate to get into the bottom lane right there. I don't think that was proper use. His wave was already pushing. He could have waited a little bit longer and then showed up into this inhibitor with Aurelia right now. And that would actually be great play, I believe. One of Alliance's best moves right here would have been wait for that wave to get into the turret or towards the inhibitor. Have Aurelia teleport, have Twisted Fate use his ultimate, both show up there, have them knock out Riven, allows them to take the inhibitor. Kha'Zix can sit here and poke Najin White Shield if they try and take Baron. Just delay them with the evolved Spike Rack. Unfortunately, this is not what Alliance do, and it's a big misplay on the use of Twisted Fate's ultimate right there. And because of this, it allows Najin White Shield to group up as 5 and move in towards Baron. Once again, their team is extremely strong as a 5-man squad, way stronger than Alliance, and effectively there's nothing Alliance can do against the 5-man squad of Najin White Shield. They're lacking any real solid poke, especially against all the shields that Najin White Shield are going to be throwing out, especially with the Baron regen. Their AoE isn't very strong in an upfront fight, so they can't try to counter the death ball composition, that small grouping up that Najin White Shield's going to want to do. And they've completely lost out on scaling. Tristana's level 17, she has the range to wreck these towers. So this is essentially going to be the game for Alliance. They had the opportunity at a 0-7 score to start their 1-3-1 split pushes, to have better control over Dragon, to delay Najin White Shield getting into this position. They had the better duo lane, and we did see them start the 2v2 fight and come out with a kill, but it was the only time they ever started that 2v2 fight. They could have been doing it much earlier on, from the point that the fight was BF Sword to Pickaxe Longsword. It's fairly similar. Alliance could have taken bot lane control from there, made it easier for those split pushes to happen. So that was also another problem, and it goes back to that just goes back to not playing your lane matchup correctly. It's not what really lost the game for Alliance. It's just one of the smaller points. You know, sometimes it's not the one solid blow; it's 1,000 cuts that knock you down. So at this point in time, Alliance need to find a way into Najin White Shield space. I think one of the best things they could possibly do, send Twisted Fate top, let him push the wave towards Najin White Shield's base, sneak in down the river, try and get into position to be able to use his ultimate to teleport into the bottom inhibitor of Najin White Shield. At that bottom inhibitor, Twisted Fate can throw down a ward, and now Aurelia can TP to it. Najin White Shield's best response is going to be a teleport from Riven, but that's why it's a 2v1, and now Riven can't fight. With Twisted Fate and Aurelia, it would also give Alliance high enough damage to be able to quickly take out that inhibitor and run away. You're probably going to end up sacrificing your mid inhibitor for this, because then it will be a 3v1, or a 5v3 at your mid turret. However, you're not going to be able to defend it anyways, and trying to defend it is essentially suicide. You have nothing to gain by being here against this Baroned up team other than delaying the game longer, and that's unfortunate because Alliance is, as stated before, the mid-game focused team, so delaying the game only makes it worse for them. They have to look for that opportunity to get something somewhere else. And here's exactly where we see it. Tristana is just tanking the tower with shields, and there's nothing Alliance can do about it. They don't have any long-range CCs to try and pull Tristana in. There's no charm, there's no cocoon. They have Twisted Fate's cards, but it's very predictable for Tristana to just simply back up. She outranges Twisted Fate, so if Twisted Fate goes in for the gold card, she can take a shot and leap back, hopefully critting Twisted Fate, doing a lot of damage, and letting her leap away afterwards. So there's no real immediate threat to this Tristana. One other thing I want to point, well, while we wait for Najin White Shield to slowly make their way in for the win, and here's a problem. We see Aurelia going in, but she doesn't go in against this Tristana. And Tristana's the one who's deadly. Alliance need to be able to use all their ultimates on top of all their stuns and CCs on this Tristana. Instead, Wicked goes in onto the Lee Sin. Tristana comes up from behind. It almost works out. The linchpin is that Najin White Shield were smart enough to focus all their ultimates and shields onto Tristana. We see Lulu running up to her to give her Wild Growth, help picks, and we see Thresh running up for Mikhail's Crucible. And we do get to see how much stronger Najin White Shield's team is in the 5v5, especially when they're being engaged upon. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about item matchups, or item choices, real quick. On Alliance's side, particularly in Lucian, the Bloodthirster Trinity Force is understandable, building for this sort of tower push potential, really trying to work with the split push and getting these quick hits. And I really do like those choices in this game. It was just improperly played by the rest of his team, Twisted Fate and Aurelia particularly. This pickup of the Bilgewater Cutlass, however, I do not like. I don't find it to be very strong, especially since Najin White Shield are not building HP. They're using a lot of shields. And the fact that he needs some sort of late game potential. He should be building towards that Infinity Edge, hoping for the crits onto Riven when she jumps in or Lee Sin. He needs high burst, high DPS, and it's not going to come from this Blade of the Rune King that he's building towards. The other thing I don't really like is Zilean picks up Aegis. I would have much rather seen Zilean go Mikhail's Crucible to stop Thresh hooks. Even more so than Mikhail's Crucible, honestly, in this match, I would have preferred to have seen him getting some CDR and Tear of the Goddess. Just so because that's what Zilean needs, particularly as a support, is CDR, so his ultimate is always up, so he can get a lot of those slows and speed ups, as well as needing the mana to be able to sustain this. As Kreppel points out after the match, buying Boots of Mobility on Zilean is a really bad choice, because you can't just pick up Tear of the Goddess or some Tear of the Goddess and Ionian Boots of Lucidity for the CDR, and this is effectively your Boots of Mobility. It allows you more speed ups, it allows you consistent speed ups, and will allow you to travel the map really fast while slowly, since you're a support, building towards something like a Seraphim's Embrace if you're able to pull it out later on in the game. And so it has solid mid-game, early-game utility, keeping Zilean at near full mana at all times, or even if not at full mana, having so much mana that even at half he would be considered full without Tear of the Goddess, as well as giving him more CDR for quicker speed-ups, quicker bombs, quicker ultimates. So it's a much better choice than grabbing these Boots of Mobility, as well as this Frost Queen's Claim. Once again, we see a support picking up Frost Queen's Claim, and there's no real reason for it. He could have, once again, turned this into the Tear of the Goddess, and that would have allowed him more speed up and slows, and on more priority targets too. So these are a couple of mistake item choices. The Aegis also is only blocking out Lulu, and while Help Picks is doing a lot of damage coming from Tristana, I think Mikhail's would have been better to stop the hooks from Thresh, even potentially Riven stuns. Though, as stated, I do think that CDR and Mono would have come in a lot more handy. So as we're watching, Najin and White Shield are running Alliance into the ground right now. Even though it's only a 2k gold lead and only just now becoming the 2k gold lead, Najin White Shield's team scales that much better and has essentially stopped anything Alliance can do. Now that Alliance have lost their top inhibitor, that their mid inhibitor is open, they can't even make the tricky plays around the map to grab this bottom inhibitor and then try for maybe a Baron afterwards while somebody defends. If Alliance at all show themselves near this bottom inhibitor and not S5, Najin and White Shield are just going to rush into the base of Alliance and destroy the Nexus. So their entire window of opportunity is gone. So that's the game. So what could Alliance have done in this match? I said it a couple times. I'll go ahead and reiterate on it more in a concise form. Alliance should have put a stronger focus on bullying the bot lane, not by bringing Kha'Zix down, but having Lucian and Zilean actually use the power that they had against Thresh and Tristana. This would have slowed Tristana down some, would have prevented Najin White Shield getting to their strong power as quick, maybe only a minute or two, but that minute or two can be very important when it comes to stuff like dragon timers or taking Baron. If Tristana was a minute later on picking up, say, her static Shiv, this is a good 400 damage on that proc that's not there at dragon. This can end up being very important. League of Legends is a game of numbers, and sometimes those small numbers really make a huge difference. Alliance also could have focused on their actual team composition, running the 1-3-1 or the 1-4 split push better, particularly when Aurelia was far ahead of Riven. They could have played the dragon timers better, that third dragon really coming to nip Alliance in the butt, or maybe it was the second one. Whichever one they gave away by getting caught in the river and then getting caught by their blue. Alliance had the timer and should have been there with wards, with vision control, and just completely knocked it out as a team. After Alliance started falling behind, and when they could no longer fight the 5v5, they needed to start to focus on ways to manipulate the map and move and circumvent Najin White Shield's team. And there was two opportunities. They did it well with Twisted Fate and Aurelia in the bottom lane. You can look at that play as they got too aggressive in chasing down Riven, or not aggressive enough because Twisted Fate didn't flash for that kill quicker. However, expecting that Lulu to come in at the very last second for the save, kind of hard to do. It could have been a game of split seconds right there. A split second being the flash, split second being Lulu not making it, or the split second decision to say we're not going after Riven, we're going after the inhibitor turret and then the inhibitor. After that, the other opportunity for them would have been to sneak into the bottom lane with Aurelia and with Twisted Fate. There was that one point where Twisted Fate used his ultimate a little prematurely, I think. He was probably looking to see if he was safe down there. But if he had saved it for a little bit longer, waited for that creep wave to push in, he could have ulted into the base of Najin White Shield. Aurelia could have teleported. They could have killed Riven and taken the inhibitor while Kha'Zix delays near Baron. When you're the weaker team, but you have this map mobility, you have to use it in situations like that. You have to realize, okay guys, we've lost the team fight, barring any major mistakes by the other team, so we need to do something else. If Alliance had been able to open up that bottom inhibitor, this gives them very strong play at Baron. They can essentially 5v4 it, they can take complete vision control, wait for an opportunity for Twisted Fate and Aurelia to get their stun lock combo onto Tristana or Lulu, take them out, then go back to Baron in the 5v3. Riven essentially can't teleport because she has to deal with the super minions on the bottom wave. If Alliance can draw out the teleport of Riven when they're in that 5v4, then Alliance just need to run and back off. They run away from Najin White Shield's team, let the minions start to push the bottom wave again, and Riven will be forced back down, and then you reset for that 5v4 again. So those were Alliance's options. They didn't quite recognize them and play them right. They didn't play their team composition correctly. I like that Lucian was building for this split push, for having lots of power in the trio rather than in the 5-man squad. But because Aurelia and Twisted Fate didn't pull off the split push properly, and because Alliance got a little complacent and didn't push together as a team properly in terms of pushing all 3 lanes at the same time, they let the game draw out, and Najin White Shield were able to scale into a much stronger 5v5 fight. So I hope the game was informative. I hope you learned something. If not, I hope it was at least entertaining. Once again, the notes for this match can be found below, as well as the link to all of my 2014 League of Legends World Championship notes and video analysis. I'm Keith, aka LoLByTheNumbers, and thanks for watching.